I now call to order this King George County Service Authority Board of Directors work session. We're going to start off with an invocation. I'll handle that, followed by the Pledge of Allegiance by Mr. Miller. Lord, we ask you to watch over this meeting, provide us your wisdom and guidance, that we may make the best decisions in the interest of our customers and the citizens of King George in general. In your name we pray. Amen.
Allegiance to the flag of the United States of America, to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
This conference will now be recorded.
All right, we will start off with public comment. If there's anybody in the room that would like to make a comment. Seeing no one, Mr. Dines, is there anyone online?
No, Mr. Chairman.
All right, we'll close public comment and move on to the topic of the day, and that's the discussion of the wastewater operator contract proposal. I guess probably to start things off, I'll let Davenport kind of explain their financial analysis so that we all understand where that's starting from, and then we can move on to kind of comments, questions associated with that, as well as some comments and questions maybe on the contract directly. Just as a note for everybody on the board, if we want to talk about specific contract finance terms, we can make either a decision to go into closed session and talk about it, or if it's the will of all the board or the majority of the board, we can discuss that openly, and that's just the finances associated with in Bowden's proposal. So that's just a note as we go into discussions for everybody to think about. And I guess I'll turn it over to kind of Kyle to give us a synopsis of what they did and where it ends up.
Thank you, Mr. Chair and members of the board. Nice to see everyone on I guess February 15th, feels like April or May 15th right now, so we'll take it. And so I think what we had prepared in accordance with kind of what you're thinking about here in terms of this decision, I think big picture, we're in the process of updating a holistic look at the multi-year financial plan. I think we've talked about this. It's been about 5 years since we did that. And so we're really in the middle of doing that right now. So I'll just kind of tell the board that it's probably about 45 days. We'll have a real good look at the operational, the capital, et cetera, and be able to come back to you with that. So I think what we'd been asked to do is maybe give you like a little bit of an intermediate snapshot this evening in terms of this discussion about the wastewater operator contract, and try and maybe just quantify to the greatest extent possible what that might look like, just the financial side of it. We're obviously not engineers or operators, not our area of expertise, but wanted to give you maybe a digestible series of data points to help kind of frame out what that looks like, in terms of the two scenarios. So we worked with Donna and Chris, and I think we have a couple copies. Did they get it in advance?
We sent it in a smaller format, I guess.
Okay, yeah, and I think we've got like
we do have a bigger
Yeah.
format for you all. So yeah.
Yeah, so Austin,
Easier to read than what we said.
we'll give you the same thing we think you saw in advance, but the end result here is working with some data we were provided in terms of what is the annual operating cost, or really annual cost of the Bowden contract, the individual details of which is not our expertise, but just sort of an aggregate, the annual cost of that Bowden contract, which is what we called scenario 2 versus scenario 1, which I think the concept there is if we take what we're doing as an authority in terms of salaries and operations and sort of increase the levels there, I guess to make it more commensurate with maybe the private sector, make it more attractive to hire people, et cetera, et cetera. So that's ballpark the two scenarios that you're looking at. And we then compared that to what our 2023 revenues, so the year we're in right now, are projected to look like. We're obviously only half, 2/3 of the way through the year, so we're using some kind of ballpark estimates for the moment, but hopefully to give you a sense of what the difference between scenario 1 and scenario 2 is. And if you cut straight to the chase, and maybe I'll let others come behind me with more details, but if you're looking at this page here, that top page, what we did is we compared what a current user pays in terms of their monthly costs. We just kind of equated it to a monthly cost. A lot of people pay their cable bill, their cell phone bill, et cetera, mortgage maybe on a monthly basis. It's about $150, $147.88 is the number we used. And then said, what proportionate increase would we need from our revenue base to cover either the in-house option, which is that scenario 1, or the Imboden option, which is that scenario 2. The incremental increase tied to the in-house option is about 2%. The incremental increase tied to Imboden is about 7%, using pretty round numbers here. If you just equate that to your typical residential monthly bill, that 2% is an increase of about $2.96. If you did the in-house option, so just round that off, call it about $3 a month. The scenario 2, the Imboden option, $10.35. If you're looking at that chart there, I'm just for discussion purposes, round that off, call it about $10 a month. So in very round numbers, the scenario 1 versus scenario 2 is about an incremental $3 a month for doing it sort of in-house, but increasing the salaries, versus an incremental about $10 a month for doing the Imboden contract. We then went on to put at the bottom of the table, there are other variables as we look at the overall finances, which we're in the process of doing. You have the other operational costs, whether it's utilities, chemicals, et cetera, et cetera. That'll need to get factored in as some of the budget numbers for 24 are developed that are in process. And then we have capital that's a very big variable that we just got some new numbers, I think literally within the last week, and we're working through those right now. So we wanted to just give you those maybe snapshots. You know, we purposely put TBD in terms of the overall impact. That's really in process. We expect we'll be able to come back to you in about 45 days with some of those answers. But if it's helpful for you for your decision making, you know, it's about $3 a month for your typical residential user for scenario 1, and about $10 a month for your typical residential user for scenario 2. And so I'll pause there. Chris, anything, details, anything to clarify or me to add there?
Just to clarify, the numbers for our personnel are obviously generated by Derek and the HR team, and then the numbers that obviously are also in here are through what Ms. Hahn had assembled based on a final, kind of an updated look on things. So on your current operations, but also just on where things stand right now. So that's where those numbers are. And then what we did is we then provided those to Kyle and let them kind of do their magic in terms of looking at how the rates would be impacted and things like that.
So I guess we'll open it up to questions from members of the board.
But Mr. Chair, if I could just say, what we were trying to do with the numbers when we look at our internal operations are, if you wanted to try to make this as much of apples to apples, then there is going to have to be some kind of an injection of personnel support, if you will, whether that's raising salaries or adding more people or whatever. I mean, probably a combination of both. We know that to do that, you're going to have something that has to take place. And that's why we were trying to get this. And that's where there is a slight difference, because Obviously, if a private operator has got a different level of salary structure and things like that. But whereas if we retained it, it's probably a lower amount. I would submit that I could come back with a really aggressive plan that would show you where we need to be actually doing better than our surrounding and competing jurisdictions so that we can get to the point where we would be satisfying DEQ, we would be retaining people longer than we have been retaining people. So I think that's something that's a scenario that could even be factored into this. I'm not trying to, add any confusion. I'll tell you this is something that Mr. Metzler, our HR director, had identified is 60% of our current wastewater employees are trainees with just over a year experience or less. And so it is a very difficult market for us to compete in, and if we don't do something about this. And that's, I think, what we have, are trying to provide you that snapshot.
And I guess I'll note a couple things too. The other operations factors. One of the things we can't capture really because we wouldn't know where it would go is if Bowdoin or would provide savings on chemicals and whatnot with better management. Don't know how that goes. And then the other thing that's not factored in is I guess what Mr. Miller went through to get Mr. Collins' FOIA information. I think we've had over the last 7 years about $500,000 in fines from DEQs. Roughly works out to about $75,000 a year we're paying in fines doing it ourselves. Some years substantially more than that. But it's on average about $75,000 in fines a year. Whether or not that goes away, you'd hope maybe it would, but that all depends on the personnel we can hire and whatnot. So, whereas that is one of those things that if in Bowdoin's people screw it up, that's a if I'm reading the contract correctly, that's on them. That's on their professional liability insurance. It's an error or omission on their employee's part.
Mr. Chairman. So I have a couple comments. The first is, although I would love to have a monthly bill of $150, I don't. Mine's like $750, which would mean this proposal would make my monthly bill go up $60 a month. So I just want to throw that out there because I know that a lot of my neighbors in my neighborhood and neighboring neighborhoods also have larger bills than this. And thank you, Davenport, for giving us this. I know that this was like very short notice, and we really appreciate that because it helps us to understand where what the increases just based on this, what our clients would face, if we made this decision. But there is a lot of other variables that go along with this, and we know that some of those financials are not ready yet. There's the variables of the fees that we have to pay for the consent order. There's the variables that we have to pay for the Bowdoin contract that was way above the budget that we budgeted for last year. That's going to have to be in consideration. And I am a firm believer that if you do have the correct leader, somebody who knows how to run this operation and can run it well, could really do a better job at the management and hopefully help the operations. We could find somebody that could effectively do a job similarly to the management of Bowdoin. And one of the questions that I have is, are we considering in our proposal with the in-house the efficiencies that we could have making the employees cross-trained for water and for sewer? This was something that Bowdoin had proposed and said that they would save quite a bit of money if they were to do that. Is that something that we're considering as well? That's the first question. Actually, I'll stop there for that question.
I think that definitely the idea of what has been proposed in Bowden's contract is something that we seriously need to look at. I think that there needs to be a consideration of cross-training people, not only according to the wastewater folks who maybe are working at Hop Yard or work at Fairview Beach or work at Oakland Park, cross-train them to be able to work at every wastewater plant. And that's something that in Bowden had said that the problem that exists with the current operations is that you have kind of almost, it's in a weird way, a specialization, like, oh, I only work at Dahlgren, I can't help you at Perkins, or, oh, I can't. And that's the current situation. And we have broken that a lot because we have switched around personnel and moved them to different places so that they can be cross-trained in the wastewater side. The idea of the other element of it that in Bowden proposed was the idea of merging having the water employees also be cross-trained. And that's something that I would think that this organization needs to seriously look at. I would agree with you in that respect, that there are ways of doing that. If you keep this, then yes, I think that that's on the table, definitely.
Mr. Chairman. Okay, so I think that when Bowden was proposing that, it would essentially save money. So I think that considering that we could save money there and not need as many personnel, perhaps. As you said, that we probably need more personnel. Perhaps if they were cross-trained, we might not need as many personnel. There's also some considerations whereby some efficiencies could be made to the equipment to help with some of the issues that we've seen with operator error. And I don't know the specifics or the engineering about it, but I know that there's some like different mechanisms that you can put on the machines whereby it helps with the human error aspect of it. And that was proposed in one of the contracts I know that we read, that they were requesting that those things be done before they were to take over anything on the service authority. So that could also save quite a bit of money, considering that I think the latest issue at Fairview was because of operator error that could have easily not been, right, if we would have had those mechanisms on the machinery to help with that human error. Another thing that I just want us to think about, and also this board to think about, is we've talked about in the past of the county taking over the service authority, and we have various opinions as it relates to who should be responsible for the service authority. And I think that as we think about the county as a whole, the service authority does support the county as a whole. The county wants to have the service authority. They don't want to sell the service authority because we can expand our economic outreach with the service authority. We can offer more, we can bring more, have more control over the development that's coming into the county. So as I say that, there also could be efficiencies as it relates to maybe some of the departments that are in the service authority, whereby the county could contribute to help the service authority to maybe offset some of the fees that could be increased. So for example, we use the county attorney, we use the county engineer. Perhaps we could come up with a way that we can save money by the county helping us with some of these things.
I would agree with you as well on that. And currently your situation is the HR department and the finance department also support the service authority and have for many years in varying degrees. At one time, there was a cost allocation or a cost accounting thing, but that ended. And I think it ended because the service authority couldn't make the payments to the board of supervisors. And so, I think that other members of this board have indicated, rightly so, that if this was a true service authority, you would have an HR manager, you would have a finance person, you would have possibly your own legal attorney. And so the county is certainly supporting the service authority. There's no doubt about that. And there's no, it's kind of I guess the word would be hidden costs. I mean, it's not, they're not being billed. The service authority is not getting charged for those services. And I've always maintained that if you didn't merge it, and I'm one of the proponents, I'll be the first one to admit, since I came here, my background, my experience has been that you have your utility functions work best if they're under one umbrella. That's not a decision that I make, though. That's a decision for the Board of Supervisors and for this board. I recommend it. At the end of the day, though, if the boards both don't want to do it, then we'll make it work. But my recommendation is that then if that's the case, then treat it like the true service authority that you want it to be. And that is that there's a separation. There's a full accounting for everything. And that's unfortunately that doesn't exist right now. So that's why it has been discussed to merge. And it never was anticipated that to go away. From my standpoint, it's never been anticipated, or I have never recommended that you keep it completely separate. I believe that it works best if it is with the county. But if there's not going to be, there's going to be a separate board, and we continue to kind of do things the way we are. I think at some point the Board of Supervisors, and I mean, I would be remiss if I didn't bring that to them, that you might need to start charging the service authority for things. Because, I mean, county services they keep going up, and so does the service authority. So, I mean, we have to find a middle ground. But I've always advocated that you create possibly like a Department of Public Utilities, like a lot of other counties have, where you have a rate, or you have your water and sewer as functions of the Public Utilities Department. There's no blending of money. There's firewalls between the revenue that's raised by the service authority for water and sewer revenues only go to water and sewer expenses and things like that. And it's not like you're going to just merge it with the general fund and the revenues from the sewer and the water funds. You don't merge that. So I think that's where I've been coming down on that. I understand what you're saying about, is there a way to continue the relationship? Yeah. I think there is. And it's been going on for, I don't know how many years, that the county has been underwriting a lot of administrative costs for the service authority.
And Chris, just to jump on that term underwriting, because the other substantial area that doesn't necessarily show up in cash flows where the county supported the service authorities, the county backs all of the debt. And so the debt in and of itself, just the ability to issue it, has really been underwritten, Chris, to use your term, by the county and its solid credit ratings, et cetera, et cetera. So that's sort of the other very direct, doesn't necessarily show up in the cash flows going back and forth, but the existing debt is basically able to be taken out at the favorable terms that it is because the county was the deep pocket behind it, when the service authority for years didn't necessarily have the financial wherewithal to go out and borrow, whether through state programs or in the bank marketplace or even public markets on its own. So I would just add that to kind of that relationship there, so to speak, between the board of your board of directors and the board of supervisors.
Thank you. And I know that the county has been helping the service authority, and it's kind of like a pseudo service authority county utility. I still can't really understand how it was originally set up, but I guess the point is, I think there could be some efficiencies if the county wants to keep the service authority to help offset some of the fees even more, because the service authority helps the entire county. So not everybody's on the service authority. Was it like 30% of people or something like
I
that?
think it's a little bit more like in the 40 to 43% or something like that. Yeah.
Okay. So then, the other half, of course, says, well, it's not my service authority, so why should I have to pay into it? But I would argue that maybe these need to be spread out so that way the service authority customers aren't 100% on the hook to have to pay, because if we are supporting county buildings, if we're supporting the schools, if we are supporting economic development, I would think the county would want to keep the service authority, again, for that control. But at the same time, when I think about that, what is the county, and the county is helping us, but what else can they do to help us if we want to keep it? Because if not, then wouldn't we just think about a sale or maybe a private public relationship or something like that? Because it just, the fees keep on increasing and we're not really seeing anything for that. And I'm going to give you an example, because the other night I was in my bathtub and my water smells like chlorine. Every time I take a bath, my water smells like chlorine. When my kids take a bath, my water smells like chlorine. Everyone in my neighborhood says the same thing. We're not getting back a product for what we're paying in. And so I just want, and I'm speaking for my constituents and myself because I am a client of the Service Authority. And I just think that if the county wants to keep the Service Authority, they really should consider that this is something that everyone is responsible for.
Mr. Chair.
Thank you. Well, can I jump in a second? All right. First thing, number one, correct me if I'm wrong, but the county does for the public buildings pays the Service Authority for the water and sewer, correct? So we pay for that.
Yes, but like this building here is not on the Service Authority.
Correct, because it was put a
But
long time
but other
ago.
buildings that are part of the county is, well, the sewer is not, the water is. Parts of this building maybe then, I mean, maybe I need to clarify that, but there, parts of this building are on a septic system that's in the back of the facility.
But
Because
the schools, they
but
pay.
schools
they have a water
and yes,
bill.
they pay their bills and all that kind of stuff.
So the county does pay the taxes that goes into paying those. The other thing I'm bringing up, and this has been for a long, the argument about those that are on the Service Authority, those that have wells and septic. And when you look at it, you know, I'm not going to say it's a what, but those that have well and septic spend a lot to do it, and it's put into their mortgage. So they pay it over an amortized, what's that term? From amortized, help me with the, thank you, because I fumble that one all the time, schedule. So they pay it out over 30 years. Those that buy a house that have water and sewer, they pay it out over their water bills, the same amount. And if you, I actually looked at how much it costs to do my well and septic, and it was quite a bit. And if you look at it with interest and then having to have it pumped every 5 years and then having to repair it when it goes bad or if your leach field fails, that's a big cost. So it's, you know, then for a lot of folks, I'm just giving the argument on the other side. They're seeing it, okay, now you want me to pay another fee for the water and sewer, and my taxes already pay for those county buildings that have the water and sewer, like the schools. Just throwing it out there. And then one other question I had, and Mr. Parker and I talked about this, is I know the rates, we talked about the different rates and they would have to raise for whatever we would do. But couldn't we cut back? We've been putting a lot of money into a kitty, well, I'm going to use a kitty, but a fund for the debt. Could we not reduce the amount we put in that fund for the debt and not raise, just raise the operational rate and not the debt part?
So that's part of what we're looking at. You've got a bunch of moving pieces right now. So this is one of them. The other operational costs are another. The capital is a big piece of it too. So we talk about the debt a lot, but it's really our term there is capital. And so whether it's debt funded or it's cash funded or it's existing debt or it's stuff we have to do in the future, that's part of all the different puzzle pieces we're trying to figure out to say, to your point, you have had some good years and you have some reserves. It's about $8 million thereabouts. Your capital program though is a multiple of that. And so it's how do we make sure that we have sufficient reserves to do all the things that have been identified in the capital program and still run the operations and still be credit worthy, et cetera, et cetera. So not answering your question directly, the quick answer is probably we're working on it and we'll be back to you. But certainly you've had some good years. We may not need to be putting as many dollars into the reserve, but certainly we want to maintain a good reserve as we're doing all that planning. And the other important piece there is that reserve is a one-time money. So, you know, it's like your savings account. If you pull out of your savings account to pay your cable bill, eventually that savings account runs dry, and that cable bill keeps going. And so that's that kind of balance that we're working through, you know, literally as we speak.
And I appreciate that. You said it better than I did.
I'm
I
not sure
appreciate
I
that.
did, but maybe just.
And then my last thing for looking at the Imboden contract versus taking on, if we kept it ourselves, we really would have to change the structure. I mean, really, truly. And we might have to throw even more money that might take these numbers up. We're in consent order working with DEQ. They might require us to have a certain standard that is going to cost a lot more to go out and find, like a class 1 water operator. So those are factors we don't even know because we're not done negotiating with DEQ. So that concerns me, is the cost might even be higher. That might make that number a little closer. Thank you.
Where to begin? The issue with staffing. We've had vacancies in a number of key positions. We've been trying to hire. I have reached out to people I know in Pennsylvania and New Jersey. We're not going to fill these positions with the salary and the benefits that we offer. So we would have to infuse a lot of funds to get to that point to attract someone and try and keep somebody. And if your figures are correct, 60% of our wastewater people are trainees, we would have to infuse more money to train and get them up to where they need to be. So from my point of view, we don't have an in-house subject matter expert to run these things and to get our people up to where they need to be. Somebody once asked me when I was working for the fire department, and I was, as an officer, what was my most important job. And they were kind of taken back when I told them that I thought that as a leader, my most important job was to prepare people to take my job, to train them and get them up to the level where they need to be. Bringing in a company like Imboden, from my perspective, brings us subject matter experts. These folks have 20 plus year history of doing this. They're well respected within the Commonwealth and the different state agencies. They know how to train people because they've built this organization. So I could see them getting our folks up to where they need to be within the contracts for 3 years, correct? So from that point of view, I see that all as pluses. As to automation and that sort of equipment, we've looked at this. We're doing this, the SCADA things. Again, it takes funds. You just can't wave the magic wand and do this stuff overnight. And I think that's why we prioritize the meters as an initial thing, and then other things to make the state happy. We've also hit roadblocks on the SCADA where stuff we've been using is no longer available, or we can't get replacement parts, or the computer programs don't talk to another computer program. We had a deal in the work with somebody. They were going to rent space on one of our water towers for cellular Wi-Fi, and part of the deal was we were going to get service for free to allow these different locations and systems to talk. They got bought out, merged with somebody, changed their name. Well, that just threw that whole contract and that whole process out. And I believe they finally reached back out to us again now that they've got all their merger stuff. But we have to just keep working down the road. I think a firm like Bowden can help us get to where we need to be. I think that would be a positive thing with the different state agencies that have been looking at us, that we're serious. You know, we've brought in one of the most respected firms in the Commonwealth to help us with this. And some of those systems that they showed us that they did, or they are still operating, were in a situation like us or even worse. So they have that track record. The final thing, and this was under my tenure as chair, the merging or bringing Service Authority over to Public Works. The biggest thing that put that on hold was getting those grants. And unless things have changed, it looked like we didn't want to jeopardize any of those grant funds by doing this transfer of the agency. Now that the grants are awarded, we're working on them, things have been set up. Can we now go back to looking at that? That I don't know. That's something for Miss Lackey and her department to look into us, or are we still better off holding off until we've expended those funds and then have a clean slate? And then just to confirm with Ms. North Barker, the Service Authority does bill the county for certain facilities for water and or sewer. Okay. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So I have a few questions for Mr. Messler, our HR director. So I noticed you have a number of job openings on the HR board right now, in wastewater and for the Service Authority. So already 60% of our staff in wastewater are trainees, right? One of the postings is for wastewater treatment plant operator trainee, so more trainees. And when I click on it, there are 4 open positions. So we're down, right now, we're down 4 trainees or operators. I'm sorry. These should be operators. These frankly should not be trainees. These should be operators. Okay. So we're down 4 right now.
Based off of the current budget that we're working under, correct?
And I will note something. DEQ has come down and said whether Bowden takes this baby over or we do it ourselves, we will have to run 8-hour shifts. There's no 12-hour shifts. That was one of the jumps in the kind of the price. So that's not reflected in our current employees. We'd have to add personnel to get a whole nother shift basically. But DEQ has made that decree that either we're doing it or Bowden's doing it, but that's coming down the line.
So whose responsibility is it to train these operator trainees? That's a question. Who would do that? Because I'm looking at the job description for wastewater manager and wastewater lead operator. And when you click on details, it doesn't exactly, now it says plans for the lead operator, plans, schedules, supervises and participates in the work of plant operators. So would the lead operator be the one doing the training most of the time for these wastewater operator trainees?
Correct. It's going to be lead operator. We also have several experienced individuals. So like I said, that 60% is not 100% of trainees. So we
Sure.
do have some experienced individuals
Sure.
who would be tasked with training, not just those in-house already, but anybody new we brought on in that training realm.
So, but right now, we also do not have a wastewater lead operator.
That's not true. We do have wastewater lead operators. We just, based on how we have the budget set up currently, we have a need for a lead wastewater operator, I believe, at Dahlgren. So that plant there is looking to have one. So we don't have a lead operator at every type of plant. The way it has been set up and the way the budget was set up was that we have 3 types of plants, as you all know. And there was a lead operator, one of those lead operators over each type of plant. Currently do not have 100% of those lead operator positions filled. They would be the ones kind of doing the schedules for those plants, ordering chemicals, et cetera. We've had a lead operator doing kind of double duty on a couple of those plants currently.
Okay. So then the next question is, we also do not have a wastewater manager right now.
That's correct.
That's correct?
That's correct.
Okay. So how do we do any of the things that we propose we might do if we keep doing this ourselves without any of these key leadership positions being filled? And I'm not going to put you on the spot. I'm not asking you to answer that question. I guess that's a rhetorical question on my part.
And I'm happy to hazard a guess, but no, it's not a guess. I would say that we will, what our hope would be is Mr. Messler talked about, we have a lead who's doing a great job, who's essentially kind of serving as an interim wastewater manager, but he's also a wastewater lead operator. So he's operating at certain plants, and he became essentially the next man up, if you will. He's been doing a great job for us. And what we would hope, obviously, is as we get more people and you have the ability to have more flexibility in the shift scheduling, that you can have those people trained on site, or you can start to get those people that are ready to go and get their certain certain classifications, take the tests, things like that. Then that essentially starts to fill that. That's our alternative scenario. Obviously, if the board doesn't want to do the proposed contract, we have to do something, and so we're prepared to, I guess the lack of a better word, we flood the department with as many people as we can get. We have had an open wastewater manager since prior to my arrival, and we had one, and then the person took another job somewhere else because of the pay. And so that's hopefully what we would be able to try to do, is we would incorporate a lot of money into this, hopefully, based on the board's ability, and then be in a situation where you're hopefully taking people from other jurisdictions to come work here.
I do want to add
It's
something.
a challenge.
I do want
It's a
to add
challenge.
something to Mr. Miller, and based on what was said. What we use for these numbers are what's in the current budget, and that's not necessarily completely apples to apples with what Bowdoin's doing. Right? It's what was in our current budget, and kind of get some stuff up. There's some real deep thought that has to go into the type of employees that we need. We don't have a class 1 operator. We've been out that a long time. And it would be my argument that you actually need to hire 2 class 1 operators. It seems insanely stupid that we only would have one, so that one should walk off, then we're completely hosed again for years and years. We just you really have to take some thought into what other additions that you might need that aren't sort of already thought out, and that's one of them. You probably need 2 class 1 operators, so that you're not in some kind of position where one of them walks off and you don't have any class 1 operators anymore. Because I think Ms. Lackey came up with a number, but basically I think every year 10 people take the test in the state of Virginia for class 1 operators. That's how many take it. I don't know how many pass it, but that's how many people take it. So, and that might be somebody taking it a couple times, but it's basically 10 people. So you have a very limited pool. So, there's some structure that would have to be kind of thought out a little bit, I think, from a management perspective, and, not getting in trouble with DEQ all the time, of positions that would probably need to be added that aren't necessarily thought of, because someone like in Bowdoin, they have a deeper bench, right? They only need one Class 1 operator sitting here because they have probably some of their management, I guarantee, is Class 1 operators. So they've got a deeper bench. Whereas if we're doing it ourselves, we've got to make our bench deep enough not to get ourselves in trouble. So that's just something to think about. That really is hard to capture in these numbers.
Thank you, Mr. Messler, for answering my questions.
Yeah, Mr. Chairman. So I would think that the pay increase would attract more employees. But I'm just curious, as we're talking about all these vacancies, whose job is it to recruit people and hire people and things like that? I just know that in jobs that I've had in the past, and I've been in charge of doing that. And I actually have, my job to recruit people, to advertise, to market. Is there somebody that's doing that for the Service Authority right now?
That would be Mr. Messler, who is the county's Human Resources Director. And as I said, the county's Human Resource Department provides the personnel management for the Service Authority.
So what happens when you have these, what are they called, requisitions, and they don't get filled? Are you rated on that, or how does that work in the county?
Well, now when you start getting into the specifics of a particular wastewater plant, there is a permit that you agree and that you file with the Department of Environmental Quality, and it says the kind of staffing that you have to have this level of expertise. And so each of the plants have some kind of a plan, a protocol that we're supposed to follow. And that's how you fill basically these positions. So like what the Department of Environmental Quality is telling us is that Dahlgren is going to have a Class 1 operator on site, I believe 5 days a week, 8 hours a day. That's what their standard is. That's what was in the permit. But because in the past they had allowed Mr. Weekly's role, who was the previous general manager, he had a Class 1. They had said, okay, we're okay. Well, we raised the objection to that and said, okay, now you're doing this, you're telling us this, but yet you allowed the general manager, who had other responsibilities and was obviously not at Dahlgren all day long because he was running the organization and doing other things. And they said, well, yes, we were good with that, but now we need this. So we know for a fact, as Mr. Parker said, we're going to have a Class 1. So it would be kind of ridiculous to just have one Class 1. We need to either get our lead operator, Mr. Whitman, and anybody else that's willing to take the test. We're standing by them. We'll support them. The problem is they can't get the time to take the test because we're understaffed and they're working hard. And so what happens is typically we, as Ms. Kupka indicated, there's a listing of 4 positions that could be filled for a trainee or an operator, entry-level operator. We advertise for that. He handles it. He's had probably over the last 2 weeks working with Mr. Whitman, who's like I said, the lead, kind of the interim manager for the wastewater. They're trying to hire people. And the issue that we have done is incrementally, we have brought pay up to be a little bit more competitive with sheets. So somebody that gets in there, and one of the neat things that Derek did was he's interviewing them at the plants. Because to bring them up here to the Rivercomb or to bring them to the Service Authority and then tell them that first day, oh, by the way, I don't know if you know what you're doing, but this is what you're going to be dealing with 8 hours a day. Not everybody wants to do that. And So we're losing people to Sheetz. We were losing people to McDonald's, because they make more money and the work's different. And, I think it takes a special person that wants to have to do that work. And I think that not everybody is cut out to do it. And it's a hard thing. These guys that are doing it, the ladies and the men that are doing it are I have great admiration for them because of it's not a fun job. And there's a lot of regulatory things that you have to go through. There's a lot of those kind of things. So, believe me, we're trying.
So what happens when they don't get filled? I mean, are you tasked with, here, you need to fill this many positions, and then what happens if they don't get filled?
We continue the process of recruitment. So it is an ongoing cycle to get the positions filled, and then we don't get them filled, then we're continue for other avenues. From a trainee perspective, we definitely have interest in people who are looking for this as a career switch, career opportunity, getting something a little bit different, but they're coming in, with no experience. I really think to raise our quality, that experienced and licensed individual is who we need to be targeting. So I've been with the county for 5 months now. And I've spent numerous hours in wastewater, 6 hours in the past 2 days at a plant, interviewing, showing people, hey, who have no idea what wastewater is. This is what wastewater is. This is what's going on. Gauging their aptitude to try to see, hey, can you come in here? Do you want to learn this? Do you want to spend the time that's going to take on the job, on your personal time to study, to get ready for a licensure exam? And trying to gauge along with our lead operator, is it going to be a good fit? So, but again, do we continue to infuse kind of trainees in? We also been looking for qualified operators. They're not easy to find. I've been told from professionals in this field that I've networked with and talked with that we're going to have to go outside the 95 corridor to find the professionals, bring them in, because we're a known entity in our area, and we don't have it all, kind of buttoned up together. So, looking outside our area, that's as far as Culpeper, Greene County, some of the conversations I've had recently with operators who might be looking, testing the waters, to come all the way in here. So it is expanding our reach and our outlook, and the recruitment takes time. If we're looking really for that experienced, qualified, staff, which I think is going to get us to the next level, it's going to take time. It's going to take effort. That leader, that manager, whether it's a wastewater manager, or another superintendent, or whatever we call the lead position, that's going to take quite a bit of time sourcing, talking, search across the country, potentially to find that individual to come in, because I like the word you put it, the subject matter expert, is what can we define to say, hey, how do we go out and reorganize? Yes, we've got subject matter expert with through Imboden, who has given us some ideas, but they are the subject matter experts. They understand how we could efficiently work, in our plants, to maximize, whether it's staffing that we need to maximize or whatever. Right now, I'm just going off of as I learn as I go. I'm not just tasked with service authority. I'm tasked with the whole county. So on the county side, I've got 500 employees plus vacancies that my department of 2.5 individuals are taking care of and are working on. So yes, I've spent a lot of time digging into to try to, because I know there's a burning issue, and you guys need to get the answers. But it's going to take time. It is not something we can turn around and just infuse qualified, experienced, licensed individuals in there, quickly. But we are looking, but the requisitions will have to get filled, whether it's it's more trainees that we're trying to assess people's aptitude on to come in, and fill, or going after the qualified. So
If I
kind
could
of
add
long-winded
to,
answer, sorry.
yeah, and it's a long answer, but mine's not. But if to fill whatever gap that we have, our current crews are working overtime. They're not taking days off during the week. I mean, they're doing everything they can, and that's please don't ever misunderstand. This group is doing a great job for us, and they are stepping up. It's just trying to keep them, because guess what? If another jurisdiction asks and you're just working 8 hours a day for 5 days a week and you're not having to work every weekend or something like that, it might be a little bit more attractive, especially if they're paying more. So that's what we're doing. They're doing the best they can. They're doing a great job. We are looking at the possibility of part-time, bringing people back maybe that worked for the service authority at one time, to serve in a part-time role, like a 4-hour shift or something like that. But finding those people that have that kind of flexibility in their life is not necessarily something that's easy either. But we're doing everything we can. We have had conversations with our water crews about the downtime that they have of getting cross-trained in wastewater. So that process of that first question that you asked earlier in the night, then we are actually in the process of doing that. Because we have to be prepared for a scenario that the board doesn't want to contract the wastewater and the water out. We have to be prepared to move the moment you guys, if that is the decision of the board. So that's what we're working on.
Mr. Chair, may I add couple observations of my own? So I will note that all of those positions have also been posted on VACO. So they've been advertised statewide, right?
Okay.
They're on the VACO website. And I just looked in Indeed, and they are advertised on Indeed as well. Is there anywhere else that you have advertisements out?
Those are the main resources, currently right now.
Sure.
As I learn of others, I will be definitely more than happy to post them out. But those are the big targets right now.
Yeah.
Okay, thanks very much.
So I guess I have a question for you. Right? Are we just using like the general Indeed, or like it's posting from VACO to Indeed and whatnot, and you're not really paying for it, or were you paying a big cash sum to get on Indeed?
We have through our current applicant tracking and posting system has an agreement with Indeed, so it is going out into Indeed. I'm not sure.
So then the answer is no. It's a general. Basically, you're getting a general post to Indeed, and the only reason I ask that is in the private side of the world, it takes a lot of money sometimes to find people. So if you want like Indeed to really highlight and get you qualified candidates and whatnot, you have to pay for their premium service, and their premium service is like something like $40,000 to get the premium service. And maybe for a big company, it's worth it. But it costs a lot of money. And then if you want to, maybe go on LinkedIn for it and have it target people in the class, it's another $20,000, $30,000 to do LinkedIn's premium service. And then if you're really, really desperate, you pay a recruiter, or you pay 25% of whatever salary you pay the person to the recruiter. So there's probably ways to go about getting the people, but as generally with the way government would approach it, it's not the way the private sector does. You'd have to throw a lot of money into a lot of different services. I know my company spends a boatload of cash try to recruit people, because without the people, we are losing a boatload of cash. But here you're kind of trying to be a net zero. You're not trying to make a boatload of cash. You're trying to kind of try to break even on this. So it's not the same. So infusing, tons of money to, we spend $200,000 in recruiting fees or whatnot, probably isn't going to go over well. They may, it may not, but that's where you end up in the private sector, is paying a lot of recruiting fees, at least these days.
Mr. Chair, I'm going to jump in on that because I have a family member who does recruiting for a corporation, and I know they have a certain allotment of Indeed, but for specialized, and this person recruits specialized jobs, they sometimes send over 500 hits to get a small pool of applicants, especially for someone like a Class 1 operator. And from what I understood, they've even changed the rules on the Class 1 operator, so the test is a little harder, so that even makes the talent pool even smaller than probably the 10%.
Anybody have any other comments, questions on sort of the general discussion on the fees and whatnot?
Mr. Chairman, I have a question for Davenport. On the scenario 2, I know that there was maintenance and customer service and like sludge hauling and some of these other things that were in the contract that would be held in the county. Did you account for those other positions in that scenario 2 as well that we'd be holding into the county?
I probably have to defer to Donna on that one in terms of.
So the numbers that were provided to Davenport to work with were the numbers that were identified in the current year's budget that the services, if a contract was awarded, would go with the contract. Our sludge hauling would still be it's handled by our maintenance department now, so that would stay in-house. So those numbers are not figured in there, as well as maintenance costs. They do a small amount of maintenance is included in the contract proposal or the RFQ response, but those things would be like the operators performing the maintenance function, like changing out of light bulbs and things like that. But the service authority would still provide the materials, and that cost is not figured into.
Okay, but also the employee cost, though, I was wondering.
And that's what I'm saying. Any maintenance, all that is would stay with the service authority. It's not included in this contract, so those numbers were not included in any of this. This is just the cost of the wastewater operators and the water operators.
Okay, so I just want to make sure that I'm clear. So on scenario 2, this cost is just the contract price of Emboden. It does not include the employees that we would have to pay in addition to that contract. So there's more there's employees we have to pay. There's things we have to pay for.
Yeah, neither does scenario 1 though. It's pulled out of both of them. So the maintenance and stuff is separated out of both scenarios.
No, I'm not talking about the maintenance. I'm talking about the employees.
Yeah, that's what we're saying.
The line B in each of the scenarios is the amount of funds for employees, benefits, transportation costs, as well as the testing, the different things that are included in the contract, those items. But anything that is outside of that would remain with the service authority functions are not included in that total.
I don't think I'm understanding.
So I think if I could try to clarify it. So the proposal was initially wastewater only, and that was the employees that worked in wastewater. And then you asked us to look at other ways that they could come back with another proposal. We reissued the request for qualifications along the lines of taking the water department employees and the wastewater employees and having them become just one contracted out operation. We were going to retain the maintenance under this proposal, which is Mr. Eisenbeiss and his crew. And I think he roughly has like 6. The sludge hauling is done by a member of his crews. And that's all that this gentleman does all day long is to sludge haul. But he's out of the maintenance department or division. The reason that we kept maintenance alone were 2 reasons. One is the ability to handle customer needs, line breaks, line locates, issues with sewer mains, things like that, the ability to respond to that kind of customer service situation, a water outage or whatever you want to call, water break that causes water in a neighborhood to go out, that would be retained by us, is what the proposal was. The other reason is that the maintenance crews also are populated with employees that do dual functions. They go and do meter reads every 6 weeks. Is that correct? So they work essentially in the meter reading department, and there's 2 of them principally, but that can sometimes get to 3. And if it's kind of becomes an all hands on deck type of a situation, sometimes when there's a need to go back and do a reread or turn somebody's service on because they failed to pay by the certain time frame. Those kind of things are still in the maintenance side, and we're proposing that stay with the service authority because it's a more customer oriented aspect of it.
I'm going to try to clarify because I think I know what she's asking. Right. So these numbers, these increased numbers, are exactly the same employees. They're not all the employees that the authority would contain. So and Ms. Hahn can correct me if I'm wrong, but basically this scenario matches exactly only what Bowdoin's proposing, only the operators they're taking, only the wastewater personnel they're taking, the maintenance they're taking over. Those numbers they're dead correlations. Both of them are going to have the same maintenance, and that's kind of in the other operations function. So they were pulled out because no matter what way we go, that number is the same. It'll go up. I mean, you might have to pay them more too. But whatever that increase is, it's going to be the same increase whether Bowdoin's doing it or we're doing it ourselves. And that's kind of where that other operations line falls is the personnel and equipment and maintenance and stuff that isn't in the Bowdoin contract we'd be doing anyway are pulled out. So it's as apples to apples comparison as you can.
Right. It
can get.
It has all of that 1.6 million there. It includes the salaries of the current or budgeted salaries for the current positions. And I mean, some of them are vacant currently, as Mr. Messler mentioned, but it is all of the budgeted positions and the budgeted amounts for wastewater and water in the current fiscal year budget, as well as the other items that I mentioned, like transportation and testing, those additional things.
Yeah, thank you. That's what I was asking. Thanks.
And did we incorporate any kind of increase in these numbers? Yeah, I know that would be his error.
Yes. When I looked at kind of that, to try to do that apples to apples comparison, I used the viewpoint of what is it going to take to retain and recruit. So my personnel numbers that I supplied to Donna, which are in here, are taking account of the increases that we need. I would recommend that the board would look at it in a budget. So either way, I think those numbers need to be reviewed too, and to go up. And this could be just, one step of a few that might need to be taken in that regards.
So I think it's also important for us to know that there is going to be things that are outside of scope, and this price that's been given to us in the contract is likely going to be the least price that we're going to see. I'm sure that we all have been in business for a long time and know that contractors are very expensive and often do a lot of things outside of scope. And it even says in the contract, maintenance outside of scope of preventative and routine maintenance shall be invoiced separately to the authority detailing all work performed. Additional staffing shall be billed at hourly rates stated in the exhibit, and we can look at that. I'm sure that it's quite higher than what we would be paying somebody that would be on staff. Again, considering that as well. I need to read more on this contract and really understand what we've been out of scope this past year. I know our contract was like $5,000 a month, and we ended the year at $300,000. Some of that being management of our employees. That's also something to consider because this organization has had management authority over our employees in the past as well. I just want to make sure that, you know, my colleagues know that I like Imboden. They're amazing. Obviously, they came here and they made a presentation and they're doing a fantastic job. A lot of these other counties, and absolutely sure would love to have them. And I'm sure they would do a fantastic job, but they cost a lot of money. And that's the problem that we face here. And so it's not really, I mean, of course, it would be a lot easier just to say, hey, Imboden, yes, please take us over. But we just really have to think about our clients that are paying these bills. And we just heard from one of my neighbors last week at our board meeting saying, I'm on a fixed budget. And there's a lot of folks in our communities that are on fixed budgets. And I think it's our responsibility to really make the best decision for them. And maybe it's a different decision than what we have on the table. But at the end of the day, I want to go to sleep at night knowing that I've fought for them. So.
Mr. Chair, I want to jump into that. For me, being on the longest time, I'm looking at it. For over the years and before my time, we haven't been putting in the money to do what we needed to do to, you know, for not raising rates, whatever the reasons were back in past boards. And now we have to pay the piper, basically. And for the clients to make sure they get good water and good service, we got to bring in the experts to do it. And maybe over time, we could take it back on because, you know, the ship has been righted. But we bring in the subject matter experts to make sure that everything's going and we don't get fined anymore and we do the right thing. Because we might be surprised at, if we still keep it, how much money we have to increase salaries or other experts we have to bring in. And then that number, that $3 versus $10 is going to get a lot closer because DEQ has had enough. And we have to understand that. And that I agree. I've heard from a lot of clients, as you say, clients that have said about the water bill, but I also want to make sure that we're on the right track and we stay on the right track.
There's also kind of a, we got to be aware of some things. So this amount is just one part of the grander scheme of the budget, and there's some big number of things that are coming down the pipeline that we've got to figure out and sort of got to be planned for. One of those real big number things is we're going to have to go to surface water. They're gonna shut the wells off basically, and we're gonna have to have surface water. You're looking at, you know, $20 million plant to get enough water for the county, or a couple. I'd prefer one, but one in one location and just send it around. But a couple plants at $10 million a piece, you know, or maybe a little bit more. So that's a big capital planning item that has to be in, whether we pay it ourselves or we partner with somebody who, you know, builds it because they need something and they hand it over to us or whatever. But it's still got to be planned. So the capital improvements that are coming down because of regulations are pretty stiff. The other things that really would provide cost savings is getting the two plants offline. I've heard that from several experts. Perkins and Oakland are just money sinks. They're just sucking up money for no particular reason. So the quicker they get rerouted to Hop Yard gets increased. There's a lot of cost savings associated with that, just the power, chemicals, and even personnel. There's no operations associated with those. So there's those things as well. But I think probably one of the bigger things that's going to be a little eye opening is the capital improvements budget, because there's a lot of things that now are coming down the pipeline that are regulated, that have to be planned for, not necessarily today, but 10 years from now, we've got to be able to figure out how to pay for a $20 million, water treatment plant, and maybe the replacement of some other wastewater plant or upgrades to Dahlgren and things like that. So the funds that they're providing are great. That'll take a big chunk if we can get those things rerouted and offline sooner the better. But there's going to be, this is a small fraction of probably some of the other things that are going to be in the budget when Davenport gets to actually take a look at all the numbers. Just sort of as a heads up. So that's why I have asked Davenport to take a look at the what we're paying in for our debt service fees, and if there's tweaks we can do that, and what we can do to skinny that down, but also still be planning for the future capital needs. It's just the capital needs have changed a lot based on kind of regulations that are coming down the pipeline. They've gone up an order of magnitude or so.
Yeah, that will be a very big driver, and certainly you have the grant dollars, and we're thinking about those and the timing of it all. And so, sort of to be continued on that. But you bring up very good points, Mr. Parker, in that's going to be it's going to be a big needle mover. But you start with a good reserve position, and certainly the $21 million in grants to kind of get all that going takes some of the pressure off. But I mean, you're right. Whether it's here or anywhere else that we work, which is lots of different places, just the magnitude of the increases in the capital for any kind of infrastructure project right now is substantial.
Mr. Chair. In my 35 years of being a public employee, I've noticed one thing. Routinely, organizations try to promote from the inside, but occasionally, and it seems on a regular cycle, they reach outside. School districts do it. They bring in a new superintendent from clear across the country. Police departments bring in a chief or a fire chief from somewhere else, a county manager, administrator, city manager, whatever the title is. You bring in somebody from the outside, new set of eyes, new vision, new thought on things. And I think we're at the point where we need those new eyes from the outside coming in who can give us a fresh assessment, some fresh input, some new thoughts of how to move forward to reach the things that Mr. Parker just talked about, to get to these things, to get us floating, to get us stabilized so we can become more attractive to bring people that want to come here and want to work here. It's a great place to live. Should be a great place to work too. Thank you.
Do we have any more questions, comments, kind of on the money side? We'll switch over real quick, I guess, to the contract. I've reviewed it, and I have asked Mr. Miller, and he's talked to Ms. Lackey about it, to have Travis and maybe even our rep at Draper, or what TRC now, just peruse through the contract, just for terminology. In the engineering field, every discipline's got its own jargon, basically, and some of the terms, I think what we're trying to say need to be clarified. I think they need to be stated differently. I think one of the ones that caught my attention was what was volumes versus capacities. I think what we mean is that if our capacity goes up 10% or down 10%, meaning we either add or take away facilities, that could trigger a renegotiation, either them give us some money back or they need more money because we added more facilities. I think it's written as volume now, and volume would fluctuate 10% probably on a daily basis. So I don't know where the trip would be. But we have maximum capacities on all the plants that are known and kind of written, and they shouldn't knock on wood, they don't go over capacity because that's a permit violation. But they're kind of known. So I think it's relating to capacities, and that was one of the things I think if Mr. Jusenberry and maybe Draper peruse through it, they can tighten up some of the terms that are specific to wastewater and whatnot to make sure we're getting what we're getting what we're trying to get from the contract. Did anybody else have any comments or see anything that they had questions on in the contract?
I have a question for Ms. Lackey. Did you write this or did they write it?
So the contract template was the original form of it. And then the agreement references their proposal, but based on some of the comments and feedback that I received from the board, in particular, I added provisions to the scope to try and clarify those areas that there were concerns that we needed to make sure that we knew exactly the scope of services that we were getting. So that there's some customization of the template, but in particular, the areas have to do with the scope. And then as Mr. Parker was indicating, it's a fixed annual cost, but we were trying to negotiate some kind of mechanism so that once, these facilities get consolidated, if there's significant new development in the county, that there's a way to adjust the contract with the existing contract. So that was the intent of those provisions there. But I'm happy to have our subject matter experts look at the exact wording of when those capacities or volumes of expected volumes or whatever it is, when those change significantly by more than 10% is what.
Yeah, and I'm not sure if 10% is a trigger point or if somebody in the wastewater industry be like, no, it's 20% or maybe it's 5%. I don't know what
and the
I don't do that work and I don't know.
It has to be proportional. So if they have a staff of, I don't know what the exact number is, but say they have a staff of 8. If it goes up by 10, they're not going to get 8 new employees to cover 10% additional. So it has to be, roughly in proportion to what their current thing. So
I just didn't know what I'm more pointing out is I don't know if 10% would require a new employee. You know what I'm saying? That might be maybe okay, 10%, who cares? Or it might be 5%. It's like, we're at 5%, we need a new employee. I don't know what that trip level should be. I don't do this. I don't do wastewater work. The last wastewater design I did was for my when I was graduating from my engineering degree. That was our senior project. And I did the foundations, not the flow throughs. So I don't know exactly all I'm saying is we should probably check that, make sure that 10% might be real generous. It might not be, it might not be right. And I think we don't want flow rates. We want capacities. Like if our capacity, we take 2 plants away, our capacity really may drop or it may not because we're rerouting it to hop yard. So, and if it's taking plants off, so I don't know how we want to work. Talking to subject matter expert, we might get a better wording to get what we want. Like if you explain it to that, what you want to them, kind of let them word it for us. This is what I wanted to do. I wanted to be like, if we add a facility or take it away, we have a tripping mechanism to, or we increase a facility greatly, we have a tripping mechanism to renegotiate this one way or the other and let them kind of give you wording because they may have seen it in other contracts. It's just my suggestion. Are there any other comments, questions, parting thoughts? Well, I guess I'll take a motion then.
I make a motion to adjourn to the next regular scheduled meeting on Tuesday, February 21st, 2023 at 5:30 in the boardroom.
Second.
We've had a motion made and seconded. Is there any discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
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 Chair votes aye. Motion carries. We are adjourned to Tuesday, February 21st, 2023 at 5:30 p.m. here in the boardroom.